I wasn't blaming Abraham. I wanted to know, because by that time I understood that we all create our own reality. And so I said, what was I thinking to create that in my reality? And then they shared with me that basically it wasn't about me, that he had gotten to a place in his physical existence where he couldn't go any further. And in order to take that bounce and to go to the next level, which is what he desired, and it had nothing to do with me, it had nothing to do with my daughter, it had nothing to do with anybody. It was what he wanted.
Welcome to the Delicious Alignment Podcast, high-vibing conversations with me, your host, RHONDA RYDER, where we discuss all things from a law of attraction point of view, including money and abundance, releasing anxiety, health and wellness, and of course, my specialty, loving your body and making peace with food. If you'd like one-on-one support from me on any topic, please go to my website, deliciousalignment.com/coaching. I'm so excited to launch my summer podcast series called Beyond the Hot Seat, where I interview people who have asked Abraham Hicks questions at live workshops. Okay, so my first guest in this series is Janet Anderton, the founder of the brand new podcast that I absolutely love, by the way, and highly recommend. It's called Dearly Not So Departed. Janet got in the Abraham Hicks Hot Seat quite some years ago and was able to ask Abraham about her husband's unexpected suicide. She also experienced contrast years earlier when her first grandchild was stillborn. Believe it or not, this was a fun interview because, well, if you're listening to this podcast, chances are you don't believe in death either, just a transfer of energy. So we are lighthearted about the whole thing, and meaning we have a lot of fun when we discuss how the teachings of Abraham help Janet not only get through these experiences, but eventually thrive again. Let's get started. Hello, Janet.
Hi, Wanda. It's so lovely to connect with you.
Yes, really, really great. So excited about this conversation. And the reason why I wanted to have you on the show is because you reached out to me and you said you have a story. You have a story to tell. And it's about your husband, your late husband. Why do you say late husband? Anyway.
That's kind of funny, isn't it? Because I wonder what a better term would be for that.
Early husband, non-physical husband, leading edge husband.
I like that. I think he would like the husband in the nebulous mist, because he had a very wicked sense of humor. And so he was always cutting up, and he was like an adult child, which was one of the things that I loved about it. But I think he would love if I said my nebulous mist husband.
Ooh, my nebulous mist husband.
That's what he would want to be called. Oh my gosh. That's funny. That's funny.
Yeah. Yes. So we're talking to Janet today about all things communicating with our nebulous mist loved ones, shall we say.
I love that.
Yeah. So tell me your story. I want to hear about how you're communicating and whatever you want to tell me, because the last time we had a pre-chat, I mean, it was just so fascinating. And I know this is just going to flow. So yeah.
Well, thank you. Number one, thank you for being open to this conversation, Rhonda, and thank you for having me. And so in 2006, and prior to that, I was just blipping along, in my life, just doing what people do. I had just discovered spirituality through Louise Hay back in 2002. So she was really my first exposure. And also the coaching world. Cheryl Richardson, I took a course to become a virtual assistant, and part of our course curriculum was to read the book that Cheryl wrote, Take Time for Your Life, which, I fell in love with all that stuff coming from a corporate background. So I'm blipping along. 2006, my adult daughter is pregnant with her first child, had a perfect pregnancy. Everything was on schedule, and she was a nurse, and we were all just super duper happy about this new grandson that was coming. And 2 weeks before he was due on May 6th, we get a call saying that my husband got a call and it said that, Mason was dead. So my daughter had gone to her shift that morning at the hospital and she hadn't felt any movement in a few hours. So she went to get it checked out. And when they did an ultrasound, there was no heartbeat. Mm. So, so like I said, I'm happy blipping along, never had anything like this happen to me before.
And how many months was she? She was pretty much.
She was full time. She was full time.
He was full term.
Yeah, he was 2 weeks. He was due on May 22nd. And so this was May 6th when we got the call. And then she had to go through that whole process of, they induced labor. And so on May 7th is when he was born, and his umbilical cord was wrapped around his neck. So he was stillborn, basically. And it was such a traumatizing experience. And the whole point of the story is that is what upped my spiritual game, so to speak, because I was searching for answers. I wanted, what is this? I don't even know what to do with this. And it was so incredibly painful. I just wanted to fix it for my daughter and for my son-in-law, mm-hmm. and for myself and for my husband and for, the other side of the family and for everyone, because it was just traumatic. It was a horrifying experience.
Yeah.
And so in my search, I had breakfast a couple of weeks later after we got home with a dear friend, and she recommended that I read Asking It Is Given. And so once I read that book, it was big. I understood it. My inner being part resonated with it so deeply, but the physical part of me was having a little tough time, just wrapping my brain around it. And so that started me on my spiritual journey, and which was a blessing. It was a true blessing, because mm-hmm. it just totally changed my world. And I began to see this differently. And right away, I began to understand. And the other thing about the whole, I've always, even before I had I was playing in the spiritual world, I've always known there was some connection that we share with our dearly not so departed loved ones. And so we had taken pictures of my grandson after he was born. Those that wanted to held him, and we took a photograph of us holding him. And then I went to like a Walgreens a couple of days later to get those pictures developed. His name was Mason. Mm-hmm. And I went to Walgreens to get the photos developed. And again, I want to remind you, this is 2006. So this has been 17 years ago. Mm-hmm. And when for some reason, I was drawn to look at the receipt when I was walking out, because that's all I did was go in there and pick up the pictures. I look at the bottom of this receipt, and very clearly it says this kid's name was Mason. This young man that checked me out was Mason.
Wow.
I knew that all was well, that my grandson was there with us. Mm-hmm. And there was some meaning to this very contrasting situation, that I, maybe I agreed to this before I came here, but I don't know, in my human self, I don't know that I would agree. I would be down for this, but obviously at some point in time before I became physical, I agreed on this. So here we are. And, that really impacted my husband along with other things. And, less than 18 months later in December of 2007. So the really gift to me and the blessing in this whole thing was that I found Abraham, and I understood.
You get into that there is no death, and I always look at it like I don't have to understand everything. I don't have to understand why something happened or make sense out of it. But there's this knowing as you progress along on your spiritual path, that all is well, everything is happening. I don't have to know why. That's the way I look at it. I haven't been through anything near what you're talking about and what you're about to actually tell us as well. But I do know, of course, there are things that happen that you ask yourself, why would this happen? And just like, I don't need to figure it all out. I don't need to have all the answers. There's some comfort in that, for me anyway.
Absolutely. And I love that that's your perspective. I don't know, Wanda, I just, I want to do a course correction if there's something that I have done to bring these things into my life, which is funny. And I'll tell you about that in a minute. When I visited in a hot seat with Abraham about, what was I thinking to create that, this next thing I'm going to tell you about. But it's, nothing had gone wrong. The point is that nothing with my grandson, nothing had gone wrong there. From a spiritual perspective, from a human perspective, yes, I saw it differently. I was trying to find meaning within myself and trying to find understanding within myself to comfort and soothe myself so that I could comfort and soothe my daughter, even though it wasn't my job, and thankfully she's independent enough to, because the path that I went down, and I'm not going to go there, and because it definitely is a rabbit hole, but because I was looking to blame someone, part of me wanted to blame someone, hold somebody responsible. And she wasn't having any of it. She's like, nope. And then the other part of me, Rhonda, the other thing I wanted, because the excruciating thing was her coming home with empty arms without a baby.
Yeah.
And not having a baby to bring home to the beautiful nursery setup. And so I wanted to start a foundation, a nonprofit where, providing like bears so that people in this situation, because once this came into my experience, I began to, it's funny, law of attraction really works, because once you start looking at something, it grows and grows and grows. And so I found out how I was like sitting there going, wow, how are any babies ever safely born? Once I started digging into it. And of course, eventually I had to stop that. But there was something, because the thing about the nonprofit foundation is that if I did that, then I would be, and I knew this from reading Ask and It Is Given and my new understanding, then I would be focusing on attention on the unwanted.
Right. I get you, because sometimes I think about, I could write a memoir about my life, and I want to focus forward. Yeah.
We have enough of that kind of energy in the world. That is not the energy that I want to be bringing to the world. I want to bring upliftment. I want to give people hope. I want to inspire people to joy and laughter and living their life to their fullest, because I'll tell you straight away, that's what our dearly not so departed loved ones want for us. They want for us to live life to the fullest, and it doesn't matter whether it's a child that was, stillborn, or whether it's, a teen or a toddler or whatever, or an older person, somebody in their 20s, 30s, 40s. It doesn't matter. They all want the same thing for us, to live life to the fullest.
Yeah.
So May of 2006, that happened with my grandson. And then I think it was 17 months later, as I mentioned, I'd found Abraham in July of 2006. And in August of 2007, I attended my first Abraham Hicks workshop in person in Albuquerque, and had some family in Albuquerque. We flew out there. My husband did not go with me to that. So I went to my first one, and it was incredible. While we were there, we also celebrated our 24th wedding anniversary, which is kind of cool. And then, it was interesting because, I don't know, probably in September, we were sitting out on our back porch, looking at our beautiful backyard and our beautiful pool. And he said, Janet, I've never known anybody quite like you. You just kind of make up your mind, and then you go after, or you do what you want to do. He said, it may not happen right away, but eventually it happens. And wow. I was like, wow, that was big. And that was, to me, that was the greatest compliment I've ever gotten, because again, I'd been married to this man for 24 years and I had known him for 10 years before that. So I basically knew this man all my life. And so that's what he said to me. But anyways, fast forward November of 2007, I brought him to his first Abraham Hicks workshop here in San Antonio, where I live today. And he went with me. We enjoyed it. We even bumped into Jerry and Esther after the workshop in the elevator bank. We walked around the corner and there were Jerry and Esther. So we actually we got to smile, and we weren't trying to push ourselves on them. But yeah, it was really, really a cool thing. And so we go do our thing, and then we enjoyed our weekend in San Antonio, and we go home, and lo and behold, three weeks later, on Tuesday, December 11th, 2007, he committed suicide. So I'm like, okie dokie, you know, I mean, right after I found him, I obviously was in shock. When I found him, and, you know, took the necessary step, called the authorities, and they came, and some friends, and a friend came to be with me, and my mom and my brother came. And then eventually the next day my daughter came. But yeah, it was traumatic, and I was shocked. But here's the wild thing, Rhonda. After all the authorities and the coroner and all that had cleared out, it happened because I found him. Was it maybe 1 or 2 o'clock in the afternoon? And so, you know, they were there for several hours, and it was 6 or 7 o'clock when they left. And so finally, when things quieted down, even though I was still in, you know, shock from what had happened, because certainly that wouldn't be my choice for him. But what I know is that he couldn't get to where he wanted to be in his physical state. So he took matters into his own hand and did what was right for him. And so I felt relief for him. That he had taken matters into his own. I remember having that feeling wash over me of him doing what was right for him.
Right. Yeah, exactly. I get that. I get it.
Yeah. And
were you surprised? Were you?
Oh, yeah.
I know you were shocked. Of course you're shocked, but were you surprised that he would do that?
Yeah. Absolutely. I mean, the funny thing was, he was 27 when we got married, and he always told me that he always knew he was going to die young. And, you know, I was like, okay, that's just not something I even really, you know, give any thought to, but okay, you know, and again, he told me that when he was like 27, you know, and around the same time when we first got married, he told me kind of what he wanted, that he wanted to be cremated. And I was like thinking, okay, this is really, you know, odd. You know,
right, at that young age. Yeah.
Well, we're just getting married.
Yeah.
And you're telling me that you want to be cremated? And, but, you know, the good thing was, and what was so funny at that time, I had been raised and not strict, but I had been exposed, and my grandparents were, you know, pretty religious, but Southern Baptist. So, you know, we were buried in the ground. And so he told me that about the whole cremation thing. And at that point in time, when we first got married, I was like, oh, I don't know if I can do that, because that's kind of creepy, you know, that you want to be cremated. But what's so funny is he and I felt so similar about, we didn't really do funerals, you know. I mean, we were such similar creatures. We were similar, but we were different enough. And so it was amazing. But, you know, one of the other things that he always said many times to me, Rhonda, was that he could be in a room full of people and still feel alone or still feel lonely.
Yeah, so it sounds like he probably had some, maybe even depression going on,
Yeah. Yeah.
even at
Oh,
that young age.
absolutely. But it doesn't negate the fact that we had a beautiful 24 and a half years that we
Yeah.
spent together. We created an amazing life. We had lots of fun. But so I noticed I really began communicating with him. Like I mentioned, we had a pool. And so about a week later, we would always do like a Texas style barbecue Christmas get together for my mom and my two brothers and their families, so all the nieces and nephews. And so we would invite them to our home. And so that was coming up, and it was after the funeral, and I had to decide, do I want to do this? And it was, by this time, my daughter had had another child already. And so my granddaughter was
okay.
My grandmother, yeah, she went out and had another child.
So she had another child.
5 months later, she was pregnant again. And so 14 months later, a girl was born. So, yeah. So, yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So she just has the one right now? And
Mason, she and a few years later, so 3 years later, she had a son. So, yeah, she had a son. And so, yeah, she has my daughter's amazing. She has created a beautiful life for herself and for her husband and children. And I'm so, like, a mother couldn't be prouder of what she's done, and it doesn't have anything to do with me. That was her and her desires. And I'm so very proud of all of them. Yeah. So, but yeah, so my husband, we had the pool. And so I was trying to decide about, do I want to have this? And something told me that this is what David, my husband, this is what he would want me to do, to move forward with my plans. I knew he wouldn't want me sitting around crying and mourning and being all sad. I mean, I knew that's not what he would want me to do. And so everybody was at my house, and I went outside. Of course, this is December. I went outside, and it's right before Christmas, and it was kind of chilly at night, but I went outside to kind of cool off, and because there was a lot of people in the house, and the pool was making a funny noise. And I was like, he was the cabana boy. He took care of the pool. So I knew nothing about the pool. I knew how to turn on the water faucet to put some water in the pool. That's it. He knew everything else.
I'm laughing at Cabana Boy. So he's the Cabana Boy / Nebula Mist. Okay.
Nebulous Mist. That's him.
Nebulous Mist.
He's laughing, by the way.
Yeah.
Because that's what he was. And he wanted to be a cabana boy. And he was a great cabana boy. I used to float around in the pool on my raft, and I made these delicious cranberry margaritas, and I would sit there and sip my cranberry margarita, and then I'd hold it up. I'd call the cabana boy over to bring me. So that was fabulous. And so I knew something didn't seem right with the pool, and sure enough, there was something wrong with the pool. The water level had evaporated. The water just evaporates out of pools naturally, and the water level had evaporated lower than it was supposed to, and I didn't know it since I didn't know anything about the pool. It's weird how I can't describe how it comes. Sometimes it is a voice. Mm-hmm. But I clearly heard RHONDA to tomorrow morning, because at that time it was like around 32 degrees. So I knew I didn't want to put water in there then. The voice said to put water in the pool first thing tomorrow morning. So I knew. You got a
message from David.
Yeah. I got a message immediately. And it was interesting because my daughter that night, oh God, that was one of the hardest calls I ever made, was to have to call her and tell her, when she got to my house the next day, she said he came to her as well. Mm-hmm. So he came to her that day that he made his transition. And then I started realizing, because the human part of me is going, you have lost your ever-loving mind. You are crazier than a lunatic. But then there was this knowing on the other side that was like, this stuff is real. This is the real deal. And so I just started, and so
You thought you were losing your ever loving mind because you thought you heard him talking to you? Is that
well,
what
just
you...
because these non-physical voices are talking to me, because I had no paradigm for that, but I could understand a little bit because I had been to an Abraham Hicks in-person workshop. I'd been to a couple of Abraham Hicks workshops, so I knew that that's the part over here going, no, this is real. So I had like split energy about it. I was wobbly about it. And then I finally began embracing it because things just, sometimes it's wild. I can see nature. It can be the signs can come in nature. It could be birds, butterflies, ladybugs, dragonflies. It's all a dragonfly on my porch last night. First dragonfly I've seen in San Antonio in almost 4 years since I've been here. Hummingbirds, whatever it can be. And I most of the time I know who that sign, that bird, that animal, I know who that is.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It's
a feeling, it's a knowing. Like for me, a lot of times it's numbers. It's like, my mother-in-law was born on 12/12, and even before I met my husband, 12/12 was like the special number for me. And so then when I met my husband and find out that his mother's birthday is 12/12, and she has since made her transition, and every time, when I just happen to look at the clock and it's 12/12, I'm like, hi Faye. So then I'll communicate with her a little bit. I'll say, hey, can you help me out with this? So I'll communicate with her. I'll have a little conversation with her right then and there. And I am feeling so good because I feel like they are communicating with me because, we have something going on, because I just happened to look up and the clock says 12/12. I know that's my mother-in-law, and I'm saying hi. And so it comforts me. It soothes me.
Yeah. And I think that's really what it's for. It's for us to soothe and bring comfort to us. And I just threw myself into Abraham Hicks, of course.
And didn't you get in the hot seat and ask Abraham about?
Yeah.
Tell us about that.
About 5 months later, in April 19th of 2008, I'd been visiting my daughter, and I knew Abraham. I wanted to go to, because I was kind of hooked by that time. I loved going to the workshops because there was just such great energy. And so I wanted to come back to San Antonio, but I didn't want to go alone. So I asked my baby brother to go, who is not, I want to say they think I'm in a cult, but anyways, and
exactly. I've gotten that plenty of times.
But he was curious enough so I asked him, he and his wife were separated. So I said, and our other brother lived just outside of Houston. So I said, do you want to go with me to San Antonio? And then we'll fly down on Friday night. We'll do that. And then on Saturday night, we'll fly to Houston to see our other brother. And then we'll fly back to Dallas. And he's like, sure. That was surprising because I didn't need him to go to the workshop with me. I just wanted him to.
And what did he think of it? Did he like it? What did he say?
He never said much. He is the total opposite of me. Very quiet, very reserved. He doesn't say a lot. He's not all out there like me.
But he stayed for the whole thing.
Yeah. He stayed, and that was back in the old days when they were all day from 9 to 4. I love those because you really got to really connect with people through the lunches. It was delightful. But I mean, I connected with people on breaks and sitting next to me anyways. It was all good. But so I was just shocked when he wanted to go. I was like, okay. I just, sometimes I wonder if he went more out of curiosity.
And so you guys never had a conversation about it or anything?
Not
too much. Is that the time that you got in the hot seat?
Yeah.
Okay. So well, that was cool. He got to see that.
Yeah, he got to see that. It was 5 months after, a little over 5 months after my husband's transition. And, I don't really remember. It's not like I had this, by God, I want to know, I mean, there was there was some anger and there was some hurt in there, that I was some emotions.
What did you ask? Do you remember your question?
So I raised my hand. I was one of the first ones in the morning called up. So, I raised my hand, and the next thing I know, they're pointing at me, and I'm like, me? And they're like, yeah. So I went up. It was incredible. And so I said, I brought my husband here in November, and 3 weeks later, he committed suicide. I mean, we came to your last workshop, and 3 weeks later,
Abraham, what did you do to him?
I wasn't blaming Abraham. I wanted to know, because by that time I understood that we all create our own reality. And so I said, what was I thinking to create that in my reality? And then they shared with me that basically it wasn't about me, and that he had gotten to a place in his physical existence where he couldn't go any further. And in order to take that bounce and to go to the next level, which is what he desired, and it had nothing to do with me, it had nothing to do with my daughter, it had nothing to do with anybody. It was what he wanted. He was selfish. And my feeling about it is that workshop that he came to gave him the courage or whatever to make his transition.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Hearing all about how how beautiful it is on the other side, bliss, and there's no death and all of that.
Right.
Well,
and
who knows?
He left all his worldly stuff behind. And the cool thing was he was still with me, and we have a better relationship today than we had a great relationship, but we would butt heads. But we have a better relationship today than we ever had.
Because I totally get that. I mean, that's like with my mom, we would butt heads a lot. I couldn't even really communicate with her after she passed for quite a few years until I could. And then now we get along great. But like you said, you had a wonderful relationship with your husband, and you do butt heads once in a while, which is normal. Yes, because they're really tapped in.
They leave all that worldly crap behind. They don't go to the other side with resentments or concerns or worries or any hatred. He had an estranged relationship with his only brother, and which was just wild in and of itself, because they had been, and it was over something so stupid. It was over some stupid fantasy football trades. My brother-in-law hacked into his fantasy football account and bought him some trades or something. I don't know. Anyways, that crossed the line for my husband. And so they hadn't spoken. I tried to get these two people to make up. I tried to get them to just put this all aside, and they were having none of it. And my sister-in-law got all in, and I was like, okay, you people do whatever you want to do. I'm just going to be happy and live my life. So that was another,
So how does that relate to?
I knew beyond a shadow of doubt that when he left, the moment he made his transition, he left all that crap behind.
Including his maybe whatever angst he had for his brother.
Right. Yeah. That silly argument with his brother over fantasy football, which we know wasn't about that. But anyways, this topic is just fascinating, because they are here to, I can't tell you, Rhonda, how many times if I ask, that they won't insert themselves unless you ask for guidance or whatever. I've had so many amazing things happen to me that are illogical, that make no sense.
Yeah.
But they just happen. And so I actually asked Abraham 2 questions. So I had this inner knowing after my husband transitioned that nothing really had gone wrong, but there was the human part of me and everybody else around me. You could feel it. A lot of people really had some stickiness attached to suicide. It was about them. It wasn't about me. And so I wanted to know, hey, Abraham, how am I supposed to thrive? That wasn't my exact question. When everybody wants me to be this grieving, widow, because I turned into Miss Party Girl. I mean, the only thing I knew to do was to do the opposite of what I'd done for 24 and a half years, which was be a wife, be a mother. And so I bumped into a friend of mine, which was totally wild. She knew both David and I. I had a friend come and do a feng shui clearing at the house because that's where it happened before my family came over and I had to leave while she was there. And I ran into this girl that we knew. Her name was Jill, and in the frozen food section at the grocery store. And she's like, she was always, I loved her. I always said that I wanted to be just like her because she was amazing. And she said, "Oh, how's David?" And I was like, "Oh, well, here's what's up." He's doing really good, but not in the way you think.
Right.
And so, I started running around with her. She was a flight attendant, and she was just wild and crazy. And I started running around with her, just having fun.
So what did Abraham say when you asked Abraham that question of how am I supposed to thrive when everybody wants me to be grieving?
The answer was that they don't have to get me in order for me to be okay. And before that, I had been asking, what is my purpose? What is my purpose here on the planet? What is my purpose? And then when these things happened to me, and I visited with Abraham in that second question, they told me, they said, maybe you are one of the ones to go out and tell. There is a story. There is no death.
Mm-hmm.
So I felt like I was handed smack dab in my hand an answer to my question, what is my purpose? And so I tortured myself for 15 years because I thought it was going to come in book form because we didn't have the whole YouTube podcast thing. That seemed out of my realm, and the book just never flowed. So fast forward to late November, and Kristen Clark reached out to me and wanted me to do a redo on her podcast. We'd done one a couple of years ago about the topic of death. And I said yes. And the wild thing was I knew my husband was all up in that because the anniversary of his transition is December 11th. She sent me the finished product on December 11th of 2022. So 15 years.
Of course.
Of course. And then it just took a few weeks later. And I was like, I'm going to do a podcast. I can do a podcast. I can get on Zoom.
So your thing became a podcast. That's what you're doing right now as far as, and what is your podcast? What's the name of it? Oh, yes.
It's called Dearly Not So Departed.
Dearly Not So Departed. Okay, great. It all makes sense now. So that's what you're doing. And then you reached out to me and said, I know you're looking for guests. I have a story, and this is what you're doing now. This is how you're spreading the message about death, talking about death and how there is no death. Yeah.
There is no death, and it's a perspective shift and a mind shift and belief shift. And if you are willing to go there, I knew that a grieving widow, and Abraham also told me that I can't resent other people for not understanding what I know. My job is to love them unconditionally, even in their not knowing.
Yeah, it's so fascinating because obviously people expect you to be the grieving widow, and you're saying, I couldn't be the grieving widow, not with everything I know. Not with everything I know. I became a party girl. I'm enjoying my life. I am savoring every moment. I'm communicating with my dearly departed, not so dearly departed husband, nebulous mist.
It's like, how do I fit into society?
Yeah.
When society sees it totally different, not all society, but the majority of society sees and experiences this different. It's like, think about children, think about toddlers, 2, 3, 4 years old. They don't have a clue what death is. They don't know what death is. If you tell them that a grandparent died or their pet died, they're not going to get all sad about it. So we're conditioned into these thoughts and these beliefs.
Well, they might, if it was like a parent though, they might be like, where's mommy? The recovery period would probably be much shorter. I would
Yeah.
think. I'm not a psychologist, but
Yeah. But I mean, but they just go on about blipping through their happy lives. They're unfazed by it. They just go on about it. They don't get stuck on, because I've seen so many people in my lifetime that get stuck when somebody in their circle of influence or their loved ones makes their transition, and they're sad. And that's, I get it. We are human. We have to process. There are emotions. There are feelings that come up. There are tears, but it doesn't have to go on forever.
yeah. And even still, we grieve in different ways. I mean, I know when my mom passed, I was surprised with everything I knew that I still grieved for a certain amount of time. I mean, and it went on and it went on. And I felt sad, this deep, aching sadness. And I'm sure other people grieve in all of their different ways, even knowing what I know now. And I know Esther. Esther went through all of her emotions that she went through when Jerry made his transition. So it's really a unique experience.
It is.
I think, and there's no wrong or right way to honor your feelings and your emotions. And if you're feeling okay and not sad, that's fine too.
I experienced the same thing. My mother in 2015, when my mother made her transition, it was a little, that was a big, I don't know. I had a different reaction to that. And I was very distraught, and there were some tears, but I also quickly realized that she was connected with, the connection showed right up for me. So that brings me great comfort. And about 2 weeks after I got back home after her memorial service, I was cooking, and she loved to cook. That was one of the ways my mother showed love. She loved to cook for her family. So I didn't cook a lot at that time. I had a full-time corporate job, and it was just me. So, I really didn't cook. But that night I was called to cook this recipe, and I was cooking, had the TV on. I had just thought, I need to turn that Vinahood on to let the steam, because I was making it was a pasta dish, and to let the steam out. And like about 2 seconds later, the Vinahood turned on by itself.
Okay.
so I knew that was my mother. She was front and center and right there with me, and just trying to comfort me and let me know she's right there with me. She just changed forms. Her physical body has expired, and she's changed forms, and now she's that nebulous mist.
Yes. So Janet, what do you do on your podcast?
So far, it's been interviewing people that have experienced their loved ones making their transition, and how that, we just have a conversation like you and I are having about how we share stories about how our dearly not so departed loved ones show up for them, and what those experience, because it's all different, and so that's why I'm so excited about it, because I'm just sharing stories.
It's not necessarily only Abraham Hicks people. It's anyone who has a story to tell, who feels a connection to their loved one.
All of the people that I visited with do have awareness and are really Abers.
Okay.
Yeah, most of them. But, I'm open to talking to anyone that wants to share their experiences about, because this isn't, I'm not limiting this to Abraham, but my message is that I want to share these stories of continuance of these relationships in hopes of uplifting and encouraging other people to connect with their dearly not so departed loved ones, and let them support them and feel the love. Sometimes, and I don't ever feel lonely. I'm single, and I'm okay with that. But now there are times when I ask them, I want to feel a non-physical hug, and I just get still and quiet, and I will feel energy come in and give me a hug.
I love that. Yes. So your podcast again is called
Dearly Not So Departed on YouTube. It's my Dearly Not So Departed mixed in with the nebulous mist of, the non-physical people, those that I've known and those I don't know, and that guidance is amazing. And I trusted 100%, Rhonda, to have no ulterior motive other than our enjoyment, our upliftment. I'm open to supporting people if they feel they need that one-on-one, because for me, it was a pretty lonely journey back in 2006 and 2007 and 2000, because there was nobody, I had no Abraham friends to talk to or nobody that really understood it. So those conversations were between me and my dearly not so departed, and there were times when I really wanted a human to talk to.
Yeah. Are you saying that you do coaching or you're open to it?
Coaching, one-on-one support. If someone wants that, reach out to me. I would be more than happy, and I would feel honored to help them kind of untangle so that maybe they don't have to feel alone or feel cray-cray like I did for a hot minute.
Sure, absolutely. I'm a firm believer of support. You don't have to do this alone. There's so many people that want to go on the journey with you, have already been through the journey, so they can kind of hold your hand through it.
Yep. And if I could help them bridge that gap and untangle, because people just kind of figuring this out, they might not really understand. And just with my skills and stuff, I think that I can listen. Sometimes you just need somebody to listen.
Exactly. For sure.
Great conversation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. You're welcome.
Thank you for being you and just for bringing your beautiful energy to the conversation. And, I could do this. I could have these conversations all day long, every day. It's just a topic that lights me up.
I really do like this topic too. Yeah. I have always liked this topic. Yeah.
Abraham talks about that's the topic that we fear most, and that's what is death, that it's death that we all fear so much. And what's so awesome, Ramona Gailey was on, she was one of my guests. Her and I could have gone on for hours too talking about this. She was fantastic, but she said that her partner Betty's transition broke her wide open. It changes you when you, especially there's something about losing, there's no loss. I don't want to go into that loss-based perspective, but when they make their transition, when they exit your physical life, a partner, a husband, a spouse, whatever, then it changes everything for you. And almost every one of my guests, particularly those, because I had a conversation with someone who had a stillborn child too. She doesn't have that perspective, and understandably so. But for anyone with an adult, like a spouse departure, it changed how they saw the world. It just changes who you are.
Yeah.
In a good way.
Well, I actually interviewed Ramona for my book. She's in my book, Delicious Alignment. She talked a lot about that in that interview because it was part of her journey of, to have more health and vitality eventually in her relationship with food. But we talked quite extensively about that. I think that's in her story in the book. And of course she channels.
Yeah. And she said she did a lot of things after Betty. I did some of those things after my husband's transition, not quite what she did, but because she went skydiving and spelunking, in celebration of life, because that's where she went, which was, considering that she was going to commit suicide.
She was having suicidal thoughts.
And that's why, sometimes it's like the breadcrumb trail that they leave us, that the answers come before the question is asked. Mm-hmm. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So the breadcrumb trail is there. In other words, how I can relate that to my situation, Rhonda, is that after my grandson's transition, I was led to ask and it is given. So that's the breadcrumb trail that was preparing me, unbeknownst to me, for my husband's transition. Because honestly, if I wouldn't have had that, I don't know what would have become of me? I can't say, but I was able, through those powerful teachings, I was able to see it differently. But the breadcrumb trail and the solutions that show up before the problem does. It doesn't always happen like that, but I can always connect the dots. And that's part of what I feel like my work here is surrounding this topic, is to help people connect the dots.
I can hear my son's voice in my head saying, yeah, you just want to feel better, so you need to believe this BS so you can cope. So humans just need to create something so that it makes sense out of these things that happen to us. And yeah, I love you, son. And it's fine. I love you, Austin. It's fine. We're not trying to convert anyone. I never try and push this on anybody. No. My dad is pretty much agnostic or atheist. My son is pretty much atheist. So it's whatever you want to believe, whatever feels good to you. Like, this feels good to me. It makes me have a happier life. And then there is a knowing. My son is always saying, well, show me the proof. Show me the evidence. I said, I'm not trying to convince you of anything. It's a knowing. It's this feeling. It's just like the more you meditate and do this, you're tapped in and you have a knowing and an understanding. You get downloads of infinite wisdom that you can't explain things. Oh, coincidences. So what?
Oh,
coincidences. Yeah, but like, only your dreams, only you know what they mean to you.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think that's why I never pushed the conversation with my baby brother that I love so much, because I could sense that he just really didn't want any part of it. So I wasn't about to try and force my beliefs on him.
Right.
If a topic or subject or whatever interests you, you're curious about it, then I feel that that's our guidance calling us towards it, to check it out and explore it.
Yes.
More.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Right. Follow your guidance. If it's guiding you there, great. If it's not, I mean, we just love this stuff. I know I love this topic of what happens beyond the physical, beyond the hot seat. What happens beyond the hot seat? Beyond the physical. What happens beyond? I love that conversation.
Yeah. I mean, and I knew, Rhonda, that my purpose was to go on and live my best life, live my best life, period.
Yeah. And I love that you said that you became a party girl. I mean, most people would think that was crazy or so selfish. Yes, being selfish is good.
Trust me, I felt the judgment. I could feel the judgment. And that is the other thing, and I didn't mention that earlier because I kind of forgot, but Abraham translated from my husband, because he was there as this nebulous mist with Abraham that day. And he said that this way that he made his exit worked so well for him, and that it was. And when someone goes there, it's a reason to celebrate. And they also said that he gave me the greatest gift that I'd ever been given, which was the freedom to be me, be fully me. Because I went from being a kid in my parents' home to being married.
Okay, so I don't want to skip over that. So are you saying that Abraham gave you this message from your husband?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. They said, your mate, they didn't say his name. They just said, your mate is here. And this is what he wants to tell you. And he's talking about that his choice to exit the planet worked so well for him. And it's a reason to celebrate.
Okay. And that it was a gift to you as well.
It was a gift because I was set free to fully expand to who I'm meant to be.
Oh, wow.
That was a big, it was big, Rhonda. It was funny.
I'm glad I kept the recording on. I know. No, this is the way it goes. You shut the recording off and then you have this great conversation, another great conversation. So I just like learning to keep the recording going. So yeah, so Abraham said he's there with you guys right then and there during the hot seat. And of course he's always with you. Yeah. And look, and it really did come to fruition that you have expanded you in your self-expression and your ability to be you.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, because maybe in your relationship sounds like
I was
everybody
focusing
else.
on him. I was focusing on my daughter. I was focusing on my job. You know, I didn't know who Janet was. So this beautiful man that I knew for many, many years and was married to for 24 years gave me this gift on a silver platter of guess what? Because that's exactly the way I felt, Rhonda. I had to figure out who I was.
I hope you enjoyed this episode with Janet Anderton. Make sure to listen to her podcast on YouTube at youtube.com/dearly-not-so-departed. You can also find her on Facebook at Janet Anderton, Anderton. All links are also in the show notes. If you enjoy this podcast, I would love it if you would be so kind as to tell your friends about the show, Delicious Alignment, High-Vibing Conversations with Rhonda RYDER. And just grab the link, deliciousallignment.com/podcast, text a few friends, post about this show on social, and let's share this resource with people interested in raising their vibes even higher on all topics. Another way you can help us spread the word is to leave a review on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen. Thank you in advance. I look forward to sharing my next guest interview with you during my Summer Beyond the Hot Seat series. Thank you and talk to you next time.